American people defenseless.
Alright, good morning, Earth. This is afternoon. This is Adam Sturch podcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, Mexico, working on oil painting Easter. Alright, I'm pretty much just picking up from where I left off yesterday. I've got most of the figures kind of hacked in place. Now I'm going to start giving them some definition with some real simple black Prussian blue outlining. And then we'll start rendering them and modeling them into place a little more clearly.
Raising the minimum wage, expanding health care, cracking down on corporate crooks that are bleeding out the incomes of hard-pressed American workers and the poor. They can't get themselves to talk about increasing frozen Social Security budgets for 50 years that 200 Democrats supported raising, but Nancy Pelosi kept them when she was Speaker from taking John Larson's bill to the House floor. That's why they lose. Look at her speech. It was so vague in general. They chose her because she was in the national security state. She was a former CIA. They chose her because they wanted to promote the losing version of the Democratic Party instead of choosing Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders, the most popular polled politician in America today. That's who they chose. So as long as the Democrats monopolize the opposition and crush third-party efforts to push them into more progressive realms, the Republican plutocratic Wall Street war machine declaration of war against the American people will continue. We're heading into the most serious crisis in American history.
Ralph Nader, we're going to have to leave it there, but of course we're going to continue to cover these issues. And I also wanted to wish you, Ralph, a happy 91st birthday. Ralph Nader.
I wish people to get the Capital Citizen, which tells people what they can really do to win democracy and justice back. So for $5 or donation or more, if you wish, you can go to Capitol Hill Citizen and get a copy sent immediately by first-class mail, or more copies for your circle of resisting and protesting and prevailing over this Trump dictatorship.
Ralph Nader, longtime consumer advocate, corporate critic, four-time presidential candidate, founder of the Capitol Hill Citizen newspaper. This is Democracy Now! Coming up, more on President Trump's speech to Congress.
Good. Fucking hard show. Oh. This is tricky. I need to raise this up a little bit. This bottom portion is position. This here.
Being Alone by Al Green, not the congressman who was taken out by security from President Trump's address to Congress last night. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Foreign policy wasn't the main focus of President Trump's address Tuesday night, but he did once again threaten to annex the Panama Canal. He said he already started.
Further enhance our national security, my administration will be reclaiming the Panama Canal, and we've already started doing it. Just today, a large American company announced they are buying both ports around the Panama Canal and lots of other things having to do with the Panama Canal and a couple of other canals. The Panama Canal was built by Americans for Americans, not for others, but others could use it. but it was built at tremendous cost of American blood and treasure. 38,000 workers died building the Panama Canal. They died of malaria, they died of snake bites and mosquitoes.
President Trump Tuesday night once again talked about Panama. He talked about Panama. And again, in his Tuesday night address, I wanted to ask you, Juan, if you could talk about what he said, what he reiterated, the points that he made, as we hear that BlackRock, the corporate giant, is leading a consortium. That's what he was referring to. BlackRock said it would lead a consortium to purchase 2 Panama Canal ports from a Hong Kong-based conglomerate. You've discussed all this before, Juan. You spent time in Panama. You were there when President George H.W. Bush led troops invading Panama. Talk about the significance of what he's saying.
Well, Amy, no matter how many times you repeat a lie, it still doesn't make it true. The fact is that during the construction of the canal from 1904 to 1914, it wasn't 38,000 people who died. It was a far smaller number of people, 5,600 people who died, and most of those people were not Americans. They were black West Indian laborers who were imported by the Panama Canal Company to do most of the construction. Only about 350 white Americans died in the construction of the canal. That's about 100 times less than what Trump is claiming. He's trying to include in there the fact that there was a first attempt to build the canal by a French company in the 1880s, where tens of thousands of workers died in that failed effort to build the canal, but also most of those workers were West Indians, largely from Barbados. So the real blood shed in building the Panama Canal was workers from the Caribbean islands. And now, as you mentioned, comes the news that BlackRock, one of the world's largest private equity firms, its CEO Larry Fink, is spending $23 billion, not just on the 2 Panama ports of C.K. Hutchison, but a bunch of other ports that this Hong Kong company owns around the world. And this is an example of the Panamanian government, which is a conservative government, basically currying favor with Trump, and at the same time, Larry Fink and Blackstone currying favor with Trump because they've been under a lot of criticism from right-wing groups because of their emphasis on socially responsible environmental investments, and they're trying to clean up their act as far as the MAGA supporters are concerned. So it's really outrageous how Trump continues to repeat this lie of all the blood that Americans shed in building the Panama Canal.
Well, we're going to move from the Panama Canal right now to the issue of immigration. President Trump Tuesday night once again emphasized the importance of securing the U.S. border, blaming President Biden's, quote, open border policies, accusing him of allowing migrants to, quote, overwhelm towns like Aurora, Colorado, and Springfield, Ohio. He went on to push for greater funding for border security to implement his campaign promise of mass deportations.
I have sent Congress a detailed funding request laying out exactly how we will eliminate these threats to protect our homeland and complete the largest deportation operation in American history, larger even than current record holder President Dwight D. Eisenhower, a moderate man, but someone who believed very strongly in borders.
Highlighting his designation last month of Venezuelan and Salvadoran gangs, as well as Mexican drug cartels, as foreign terrorist organizations. Trump then described Mexico as being controlled by cartels.
The territory to the immediate south of our border is now dominated entirely by criminal cartels that murder, rape, torture, and exercise total control. They have total control over a whole nation, posing a grave threat to our national security. The cartels are waging war on America, and it's time for America to wage war on the cartels, which we have done.
For more, we're joined now from Phoenix, Arizona, a border state with Mexico. by longtime immigration activist Erica Andiola. She was the press secretary for Latino outreach for the Bernie Sanders 2016 presidential campaign. And she has a recent op-ed piece in the Arizona Republic headline, "Deporting immigrants like me won't make eggs cheaper or your family safe." Erica, respond to what you heard Trump say last night.
Yeah, nothing new. It's the same type of strategy, right? You pick this marginalized group, in this case the immigrant community, and you double down on ensuring that the American people create this image, right? That immigrants are really the villain, the ones that are taking your jobs, that are stealing your wages, et cetera, et cetera. And the reality is that is false. We know that the majority of Americans in this country contribute greatly to the economy, contribute greatly to our communities. But unfortunately, it is a great way for Elon Musk to do what he's doing and keep people distracted, right? Thinking that they are going to make people safer by detaining grandmothers, DACA recipients, teachers, right? And that reality is far from the truth. So there's nothing new that he said, but he is doubling down on creating this image for the American people that immigrants are to blame for every single one of their problems, when we know who are really the ones who are slashing Medicaid and trying to get rid of Social Security for the American people.
And Erica, could you talk about the latest month and a half of the mass deportation program that's been occurring? The number of arrests supposedly have leveled off, but the number and deportations are actually, according to the government's own stats, fewer right now than they were under the Biden administration. But there's a huge increase in the number of people in detention.
Right. That's right. That's a plan, right? You have corporations that literally own these detention centers, who have lobbied for years, for decades really, who have lobbied to ensure that we have more and more immigrants detained, so that they can continue to profit out of our people. So I'm not surprised that there is more demand from the Trump administration to ICE to continue to detain people. But the fact is that our people are ending up in detention centers, detention camps. And the reality is that the actual number of people who are in these detention centers, people who are getting arrested and placing deportation proceedings, the majority of them don't even have any criminal record. And some who do are actually people who just returned to the country after being deported, maybe to see their families again, what you call a re-entry, right? Which it's also labeled as a criminal conviction. So what I'm trying to say is that the majority of our people who are detained right now, who are being arrested, are not necessarily the people who Trump was speaking about last night. The rapists, whatever he says every single time, he paints this picture to make sure the Americans believe that those who are being arrested are really those who are posing a threat to the American people. But that's really far from the truth of what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing from other organizations who are getting the calls from the American community, who are getting picked up for doing nothing, for maybe driving or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I mean, I just heard the story of a Guatemalan American who was driving between two New York cities, right outside of New York City. She was pulled over by ICE. She was asked for her ID. She showed her driver's license. She already has started to carry her passport. And then they said, we want another federal ID. She showed her passport, and they said, we're not letting go of you until you tell us where you illegally got this passport, a totally legal ID. And they held her for hours on the side of the cold road as she saw person after person pulled aside. She said it was very clear there were people of color. 3 people were taken into a van and handcuffed until they finally released her. Erica Andiola, I want to thank you for being with us. Longtime immigration activist. We're going to link to that piece you wrote, "Deporting immigrants like me won't make eggs cheaper or your family safe." This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, and we're going to move from one border to the other. A major focus of President Trump's address Tuesday night was tariffs, after imposing stiff new tariffs on America's three largest trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China. Early on Tuesday, President Trump will double down on his decision during his speech.
They're about protecting the soul of our country. Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much. No, you're not. Oh.
For more on the tariffs, we're joined from Ottawa, Canada, by Hadrian Martins-Kirkwood, Senior Researcher at Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. His most recent piece, 10 Trump-proof nation-building projects for a strong, independent Canada. Hadrian, we only have a minute, but if you can respond to what President Trump has done, and of course your Prime Minister, Trudeau, held a news conference saying, then we're going to have to retaliate and apologize to the American people for doing this, saying he understood it's the president, not the people.
Well, I mean, if there's one feeling in Canada right now, it's probably betrayal. We trusted this relationship with the U.S. for a century. We count on the U.S. as an economic partner. We're obviously very closely culturally tied. And this just kind of throws everything into question. How are we supposed to negotiate with a partner like this that tears up the trade agreement we have, that keeps moving the goalpost in terms of what Canada is supposed to do? It's just a really untenable situation.
And Hagen, what do you think will be the impact? Because especially in the Midwest depends a lot for its oil and even energy in some places from Canada.
Yeah, so we see this, and this is going to hit both sides of the border really hard. There's no winner in a trade war. Households are going to see costs grow up by a couple $1,000s a year. I've seen different estimates. But there's also thousands, maybe tens or even hundreds of thousands of jobs at risk. That's going to, again, hit both sides of the border due to this trade war. It's going to hit Canada more proportionately just because of the size of our economy. So Canada almost certainly will go into a recession immediately because of these tariffs.
And Hadrian, what do you think will turn this around? And what is the response overall of the Canadian people?
Right now, we're seeing from our federal government, they're treating this like an ordinary trade dispute. They put tariffs on us, we'll put tariffs on them. I'm not sure that's sufficient, and we're seeing some leaders in Canada talk about more ambitious measures, things like reducing the exports of electricity and critical minerals to the U.S., putting limits on procurement contracts, not allowing U.S. firms to do business here in different ways, pulling U.S. liquor off the shelves in some provinces. So there's all sorts of measures on the table. If there's one silver lining to this whole situation, it's that Canada seems to be more unified than ever across the political spectrum, that we need to really be disentangling ourselves from the U.S. economically.
Hadrian Martins-Kirkwood, thanks so much for being with us. Senior Researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, speaking to us from Ottawa. We'll link to your piece, 10 Trump-proof nation-building projects for a strong, independent Canada. Coming up, more on President Trump's speech to Congress.
Fiercely explosive meteors of fear. Fiercely explosive meteors of fear. Come plummeting down from the sky, piercing the ground. Always on the attack. Always on the attack. Always on the attack. Always on the attack. Come plummeting down from the sky, piercing the ground. With fingers of doubt and mistrust, torrents of abuse, like shards of blind glass. Always on the attack. Always on the attack. Always on the attack.
Alright. Pausing. Need to think about what I'm doing here. That step is pretty solid.
Meteors of fire.
Now we're going to start highlighting and shadowing them as well, but I'm going to let all that dry first. Thinking about whether or not maybe I should throw in some brighter, lighter purple, or moving into the pinkish realm. I kind of like that deep purple. Threw some Prussian blue into the magenta white mix last night when I was working on this, and it deepened it considerably more than I anticipated, but I really kind of dig the color. I think it's kind of setting up a nice contrast throughout the composition. So, that might be it for the minute. Listen to the rest of what this atrocity has to play out for the morning, and call this good for the moment. That's Adam Sturch broadcasting from the Mushroom Mansion House, Mexico, working on oil painting Easter. Thank you for watching, and have a good afternoon, Earth.